At this point, I'd like to get all the four speakers up here, and we'd have time for a few questions. That's good.
The only thing I want to say first is I saw the title of Dale's speech when I was flipping the papers. He didn't tell you the title. It's called Apocalypse Later.
That was in the program. You were supposed to say that.
Oh, it was in the program? I don't read the program.
This is a question for you, Dale. When you, later, if you could give me the source for the quote of "No peace without justice," and because I have, it reminded me of Pope Paul's saying of, "If you want peace, work for justice," which has been the rallying cry for those who overemphasize the horizontal. And but do you think that the Pope was thinking of that phrase? And if not, and even if not, would there be an appropriate rejoinder to the people who are saying the emphasis on social justice, who use that by connecting it to Chesterton's, putting in context of both Pope Paul VI and Chesterton?
Chesterton's line, I don't know that it's original because it's such a universal idea among Catholics, but certainly Chesterton's understanding of social justice comes from Pope Leo XIII, and I think he's just simply enunciating a Catholic truth, but I can find the phrase for you. And Pope John Paul II was more familiar with Chesterton than we know. Chesterton was very popular in Poland, so the Polish people are quite familiar with Chesterton. Chesterton visited Poland, and I have a walking stick that Chesterton got while he was in Poland from the town of Zakopane, where John Paul II would go mountain climbing in his youth.
Good answer there. Just, I guess, a question for you, Dale. I noticed that it seems like some of the latest books that try to bring our culture back or transform our culture have been reviewed in some secular places, and I noticed two things: hostility and the fact that obviously the reviewer never read it. So I was wondering, is this progress for us, or how can you address that? As sort of a semi-question, I understand, but.
Oh, I think that for instance, the reaction to Father Ian Carr's new biography of Chesterton, which is a 750-page biography published by Oxford University Press, major press comes out with this major biography. The response was just across the whole gamut, but most of all the Catholic journals were just praising this as something really monumental and loving it. The secular press going bananas trying to do something to discredit, but they weren't. And funny, I had to sit with Father Carr because he was so distressed by the reviews. I said, they're not attacking you, and they're not even attacking the book. They're attacking the Catholic Church, because here is someone who really is a recognized international authority on Cardinal Newman and saying Chesterton is the intellectual and spiritual heir to Cardinal Newman. And Cardinal Newman's not controversial, but Chesterton is, and they don't want that. They can still brush aside Newman, but now Chesterton's getting in their face, and they don't like that. This is good. This is very good. They're grappling with it, and the reviews, I think, are reflect that he's no longer being ignored, and that's great.
Just a quick follow-up. Looks like at least from what I've seen, the TLS was the only sort of secular one that seemed to be pretty positive about that. I thought that seemed to be.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a fairly. But there have been some other ones that, even though they want to toss him, yeah, of course he hated the Jews and everything, but yeah, he still was a pretty good writer, and we have to give him some credit. Maybe it's time we read a little Chesterton again, because we're intellectuals too, So I'll tell you where there was a really surprising article on Chesterton was in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Did anybody see that one? It's out within the last 2 weeks. The Chronicle of Higher Education, which that's read pretty much across the board on every college campus by professors, and that was very positive. And it was about specifically about Chesterton himself, just with a reference to the Ian Carr book, but it wasn't a review of the book. It was about, this is an important writer and we need to reconsider him. Yeah.
Question for the Englishman.
Or wait, that's you. No, you're French. Yeah, French.
I was curious as to how your quest for Shakespeare has been accepted by the intellectuals as far as his Catholicism. Could you just say?
Yeah, I think that's actually a good parallel with the reception of Father Carr's book on Chesterton. I think that we have, well, it's almost apocalyptic. In Chesterton's day, Catholic writers could swim in the secular mainstream because there was a genuine openness to argument as opposed to quarrel. Whereas I think today that these secularists, this actually harks back to Helene Bellot, but he can't be here actually for the questions. But as our great friend Bellot was saying earlier, it's basically a fight to the death between the church and anti-church, Christ and antichrist. For the most part, the secularists are keeping a stony silence for the most part. But I've heard some encouraging things. For instance, one of the top Shakespearean directors in Washington, D.C. was giving a public talk. And at the end of his talk, someone asked the question to him, what about Shakespeare's religion? Did he have any religious beliefs? And it's very interesting. This liberal director says, well, many people are now saying he was a Catholic. So, in other words, when you talk about Shakespeare's religion, it's the Catholic Shakespeare is the one that's very much in the ascendant now. And the other thing I think is going to happen, there's a new Hollywood movie coming out imminently. I think, what's it called now? Anonymous, which basically is has William de Vere, Edward de Vere, Duke of Oxford, Earl of Oxford, as the Shakespeare. In other words, the Shakespeare isn't Shakespeare. And I think that the more that you can show and prove that Shakespeare was a Catholic, the more that they're going to like other people being Shakespeare, to sidestep the whole issue.
Dr. Martin, being a professor on a secular campus, how do you find you're being received teaching, blatant fallacy of Christianity?
I've managed to tolerate them and let them work with me. Did you ever see the movie Braveheart?
Yeah.
You just gotta wade in there,
Wait a minute. I didn't see it. I actually literally didn't see it. I'm glad I didn't.
I knew the mind was meant to come to a point. I didn't know the tail was meant to come to a point, too. But the teaching's a noble profession, and more people need to go into it. Once you get in there in any teaching, elementary, in any place, you're smarter than they are. What I did is I created my own newsletter, and I critique what the administrators write or what they do with the campus. And I sent it to all the faculty, the Board of Regents, the governor. I have about 300 people I've sent it to for 25 years now. So when they, for example, they were worrying about insuring their partners on the campus, their significant partners, and they always hire the trailing spouse. So if you get hired, they'll always hire your partner or your trailing spouse that comes with you to put in the faculty too. So they only ever have to interview one to get two liberals. So I wrote, my article is entitled Shacking Up at UNK, which is the university that I work, and I tried to figure out how long you'd have to spend with someone in order to be a partner, and how many partners you could be limited to, and how many can get insurance. I just sent it to the whole faculty. And all they ever say to me is, hello. And they walk right by me. Thanks for the question.
What about the student body? Do you think that are the students receptive?
The students have good bodies.
They're very, I mean, you go in there, you've got beauty, truth, everything Joseph Pierce talked about, and you're up against ugly people who read vampire literature, and graphic literature, which is now in all English departments. You read comic books with kids. It's easy to combat them because anybody, you didn't go to college to answer global questions and issues. You went to college to fall in love. You're 18, for God's sakes. Who wants a job when you're 18? Especially a job. It's not a vocation or a passion. I think they take to it like fish to water. Your soul wants beauty.
Amen.
How would you respond to those who are reading the vampire literature? I know a young person who's into that, and I'm just, it sounds like she's a lapsed Catholic, and she's now into this vampire stuff, and I'm just.
Usually they're kids that grew up in the 60s, and they're not happy people, and they're suffering, and there's no joy to them usually if you see them in a hall or something. They're angry.
This is a 20-something.
Pardon?
This is a 20-something that
The vampire literature.
Yeah.
20-year-old girls like the vampire literature.
They need to learn to dance.
Here's a
They
question.
need to pick up some music and learn to dance and have some fun. Take tango lessons or something. My wife and I have been doing that. You want bloody, you find a boyfriend. I don't know what to tell somebody who wants to stand. You've been playing with electrical gizmos too long. You need blood in your life or something. I really don't know what to say. It doesn't belong on a college campus.
That's right.
Professor Pierce, with regard to finding commonality in the area of beauty, I think what is being discussed currently kind of sets in counterpoint to something that you were trying to make with two people from, say, different points of view here admiring the same sunset. But can you imagine an Orthodox Catholic and, well, I don't know, X, admiring, say, a meat dress worn by Lady Gaga? Okay. Or this latest vampire phenomenon that is taking place on television. And I also, I happen to be reading an essay here by Belloc where he mentions that back in the 30s, and I've seen this picked up in other novels at the time, that there was really an attack by the radicals of the time on people's concept of art, especially in music and in painting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, our good friend Belloc earlier talked about the part of the attack on the good, the true, and the beautiful would be to attack virtue and to attack beauty. And certainly that so-called art today is an affront to beauty. I also believe that people can share in ugliness. You know, two sinners living a miserable life gain some sort of consolation by getting together in their misery to read vampire novels or whatever else they want to do. Because, you know, that we are meant to love. And, you know, we made in the image of God. And if we begin to shrivel like Gollum in Lord of the Rings, we still need communion. But it becomes, of course, a rather pathetic parody of what it's meant to be, a shriveled parody of what it's meant to be. So the objectivity is what I'm talking about, is that, you know, I think again in Chesterton, the Man Who Was Thursday, when Gabriel Syme is tempted to despair, sort of pessimism to get the better of him, that maybe there is no reality at all, maybe everybody is just a mask. The way he escapes from that despair, pessimistic despair, subjectivism, is to engage in conversation with another. So what I'm really saying is that looking at the same sunset, sharing the experience of beauty together allows us to get to the objective beyond the snare or the trap of ourselves, narcissistic self-centeredness. So that's the important thing about it, I think, is it takes us beyond ourselves to the other. And if you can share it with another, we're getting beyond the subjective to the objective, in other words, towards the truth.
I think part of the strangeness of modern art, which began, of course, in the 20th century, and is sort of epitomized by the things we see that you mentioned, is that there is a rebellious quality, but it's rebelling against what is good and what is normal. And what Chesterton represents in that counter-revolution is a rebellion against evil. He represents heaven rebelling against hell.
When you're talking about the heresies earlier, usually the sides were pretty clear, especially in Islam, for example, either you were or you weren't. But when we're talking about modernism and the Catholic Church in particular, and all the 6 comments about the smoke of Satan has infiltrated the church, when you're talking about any kind of infiltration and what we're dealing with today, is there anything we can learn from Bella or Chesterton in 2 heresies basically facing off against each other, but when perhaps the lines are not as clear as they've been in the past?
Well, that's a profound question, because you can see people reacting, shutting everything out. You know, I do the character of Stanford Nutting on Dale's show, and the liberal in the fancy sweater who's just, a real, everything goes. Nothing is everything is nothing. There are no distinctions. God is vague. But also then, I've got another character that we do on YouTube and in some of our shows, who's Stanford Nutting's identical twin half-brother, who believes he's an extreme radical traditionalist, angry, puritanical, mad trad, who shuts everything out and is obsessive compulsive and hateful and despicable. Exactly the opposite of Stanford Nutting. There's nothing but lines and divisions. So I think it's easy to make one mistake or the other in combating the modern world. The thing that transcends it is the call to love our neighbor. So that we have to realize that if we're in a parish that's vague and blurry, where we can't quite tell if we're hearing heresy, if we're hearing heterodoxy or orthodoxy, well, maybe we need to find another parish, especially if we have kids. But at the very least, we've got to remind ourselves that this, even though it's a battle, even though the lines are drawn, the way the battle is won is through love. The way the battle is won is through self-sacrifice. And so that transcends really worrying too much or getting too defensive. At least that would be my personal answer. I think that's the best thing to say.
There's a chapter, one of the shows that we did, that became a chapter in my book, Common Sense 101, is called Puritanism and Paganism. And that's the problem, is that you have this false war going on in the world. Most Hollywood movies are the pagans versus the Puritans. And neither side is right in that battle. And the Puritans represent, as Chesterton says, an alternative form of righteousness. And the pagans are an alternative or a parody of liberty. And so you have a misunderstanding of liberty against a misunderstanding of virtue. And the Catholic Church has the right understanding of both.
I don't know whether please feel free to decline this, because I want to put you on the spot now. This is a question for Stanford Nutting.
Get the sweater?
I just think that this whole conference has been a bit one-sided. And I want to know how Stanford Nutting would describe the importance of love in the battle for truth in the church today.
I can't do it without the sweater.
The power's in the sweater.
But for Stanford Nutting, love just means whatever. So that would be his answer. Whatever, which is the great philosophy of the day, that Tom and others are trying to fight against whatever.
The great thing about the character of Stand Up for Nuts, he always starts off so nice and tolerant, but by the end of it, the veins are popping out of his neck every time. Never quite works out for him. Oh, there's one more question from your alternate father-in-law over there.
Actually, I just want to thank Lou Horvath for working so hard in the Rochester area to put this together and bring such talent, even Joseph Pierce.
John?
John, okay.
John. Enough.
Thank you, Lou.
Never mind.
Thank you very much, everyone. This has been a great conference.